And so you're probably best to put this on speaker view. Anyway, thank you for coming here. I really appreciate you taking your valuable time and joining us here. You know, when this happens, when I give these talks, I feel responsible to provide important and meaningful information for you that you can take away and hopefully use in your lives. First, a great thank you to Dr. Johnson and to Ms. Cole and the counseling staff at Hermosa Beach, who show great leadership and understanding of the needs of kids' mental health. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this. And also thanks to Kelly and Laura McIntyre of South Bay Families Connected, who I've been working with since their inception. And it's been they're a great, great resource for all of you. So if you haven't been on their website, definitely go on and find great information. I'm Dr. Mo Gelbart. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health at Torrance Memorial Medical Center and the Executive Director of the Thelma McMillan Recovery Center. I've been in this community for 45 years as a psychologist. And more important, or most important for this talk, I'm the parent of 2 children, grown children, but have 2 little grandchildren who, you know, have been obviously going through what everybody else is going through. So the reality is, let me start, none of us have ever experienced anything like this, obviously. In addition to the pandemic and COVID, we have had civil unrest. We've had the election trauma, and which still continues on, the school closures, fires, and now all of a sudden, you know, we turn around and come back to a whole new surge in COVID cases and, you know, in hospitalizations and deaths growing. So it's incredibly stressful times. So I just want to briefly address a little bit, you know, things that you already know and are going through. And to a large extent, you don't need me to tell you about them, so I'll do it relatively briefly. Mostly at the end, you know, there'll be some time for questions and answers, and I'm interested to hear how you're doing and how you're coping with some of these issues that I'm going to bring up, how you're handling your emotions. And most important, what I would like to talk about is how can you and your family grow through this time? So let me kind of give you the last chapter, the end of the story, the objectives of what we're going to try to do. The main objectives of this brief discussion is we need to learn how we can thrive rather than just survive through this. We need to learn how we can grow and not just shrink or stand still. We can be stronger and not weaker as a result, and we are more resilient than we think we are and need to learn and understand that. Actually, speaking of resilience, I'll be talking more about resilience in one of the upcoming talks. So as I said, a few moments to identify what we and our kids are experiencing. You probably heard and know we have the highest rates of anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, mental health issues in our entire lifetimes. The mental health hotlines and clinics are literally ringing off the hook, 400 or 500% increase in calls. Have the highest rates of alcohol and substance abuse among adults and children at this point. There's a new psychological term called Coronaphobia. It's coined by the American Psychological Association. And it's identified as having fear and emotional and social strain experienced by the general public. You know, our normal coping mechanisms are gone. I mean, the things we used to do to handle stress and pain and difficulty are for the most part absent. We'd go to the gym, we'd see our friends, we'd go to a restaurant, we'd go to a bar, we'd take vacations. So most of that is absent at this point. And so, as I said, our coping mechanisms have either been eliminated or have had to be replaced. And now, you know, on top of that, all, as I said, we're in a new lockdown coming. Or psychology. By the way, it'd be good if everybody would please mute themselves as well in this environment. Thank you. The other thing is our roles have become blurred and many times gone, you know, with lots of people working from home. You know, we become parent, cook, teacher, caretaker if there are elders in the house, homemaker, housekeeper, all of those all at once, all during the day. One of the things that is missing are the transitions we used to have. In other words, you get up and then you take a drive to work. And during that time, you know, your mind kind of begins to get ready for the next level, the workday. And then you get back in your car and you come home at 5 o'clock. And again, you transition from that role into role of father or mother. And you have dinner and then you take some more time. So again, all these transitional times are blurred again. And that's very, very stressful on us. The adults and children are experiencing, as I said, mental health issues, including obsessive compulsive disorder, distress, avoidance, panic attacks, anxiety, hoarding, paranoia, depression. So a lot of mental health issues, as I said. And what's important is to understand is all of these exist on a continuum. So meaning some level of some of these is normal, natural, and not a sign of any significant problem. We're all experiencing some of this. In fact, when somebody is not experiencing it, I'm more concerned that they are somehow handling all this without ever feeling anything negative. It just means to me that they're keeping what they're feeling down and suppressed. As I said, the American Psychological Association study shows that adults who are parents have much higher degrees of stress than adults who have no children. And that's because we worry about things in regards to education, our kids' basic needs, their access to health care, missing out on major milestones. And again, anxiety is probably one of the major symptoms that people are feeling. And anxiety is prevalent when when the unknown is ahead of us. We don't know really what things are going to happen. We have a vaccine coming, hopefully, I'm sure. But even that, we don't know what the future is going to hold. And so uncertainty always brings a lot of anxiety. So the question is, how can we cope? What are some tools for coping? So one first is, although this may be difficult, I think it's important to embrace the moment rather than just wish it away. We can't just act as if this is not occurring. And that may sound like, well, of course, but when I work with parents, I see a lot of them want to make their kids feel normal, and in doing so, try to make things be as normal as they were before the pandemic. And as such, it becomes too much of a strain, I think. So these are, I believe, learning times, and we need to work at sort of not wishing our lives away. I've talked to a lot of people who have had very positive experiences as a result of the pandemic. And again, of course, this is, again, on a continuum. And if somebody's experiencing serious health issues, serious financial issues, it's really hard to embrace the moment. I understand that. But difficult times often bring new skills and solutions, and challenges bring opportunities. So what we need to learn, as I said earlier, we need to learn to thrive rather than survive. Instead of seeing things like social distancing, we need to see things, physical distancing. Studies show that if you change social distancing, just the word, to physical distancing, you begin to feel better. We also need to, as I said, that these challenges bring new opportunities. So for example, with social distancing, a lot of people have improved their communication skills, both verbally and in writing. With no restaurants open, people have become better chefs and better cooks. With distance learning, teachers have become more creative and have found new ways to reach children, hopefully. So again, although these are difficult, the difference between thriving and surviving is rising up to the challenge and meeting it. Excuse me. So again, as I said, we need to embrace the moment in the sense that we need to acknowledge our fears, our concerns, our loss, our sadness, and other fearful and negative thinking. I'm not suggesting we give in and surrender and wave the white flag. I'm just saying we need to have a healthy respect for what we are going through. In the future, we're going to look back at this time, probably, in my opinion, similar to the way our parents and our grandparents who went through depression look back at that time. And it stays with them for not just a year or two, but for 30, 40, 50 years, well, actually now it's almost 100 years since the Depression. And people who haven't went through that in any way still have an impact from that. And I personally believe that, you know, us and more important, our children in the years to come, they'll be talking about the pandemic of 2020. And, you know, hopefully they're not hoarding toilet paper or something, but there will be impact and effect in the years to come. So the first step is in making changes is actually accepting what's going on rather than trying to deny it. I use the metaphor or the image of a stream going downriver. And if you're caught in a stream, you can't turn around and swim upstream. You have to sort of go with the flow. You have to be careful. You have to not bump into logs and rocks and so on. But you have to learn to navigate the dangers as you go. And that's what we have to do in this pandemic. We can't try to get out of it by swimming upstream, because that just tires you out and eventually, you know, you get tired or drown or something. So we need to, again, a healthy degree of acceptance that this is the new normal, so to speak, and we need to deal with it as it is. So to do this, a few tools. One is we need to know the connection between our thinking and our feeling. And we can teach these kinds of connections to our children at any age that they are. So our feelings are always correct. If you tell somebody you're sad or unhappy, somebody can say, no, you're not. You don't feel that way. So what we feel is always correct. Now, during this time, we feel anxiety, fear, sadness, depression, and many feelings along those lines. The interesting part is our feelings are always controlled by our thinking. And we can realistically change our thoughts. And if we change the way we think, we can change the way we feel. It's the proverbial, the glass is half empty or the glass is half full. You know, if we go out, it's a partly sunny day or it's a partly cloudy day. If it's a partly sunny day, we're going to feel a little better. If we see it as a partly cloudy day, we're going to feel a little bit worse. And the great thing about this is when we talk about thinking and perception and attitude is what's happening in our world doesn't have to change. It's our attitude and our perception towards it that can change and make a difference in how we feel. And so the goal is to reduce unrealistic, all or none thinking, black or white thinking, and replace it with sort of gray thinking. So for example, if you're thinking, my child will never, ever recapture this year of 2020 of education, they're going to be behind forever. I've heard that from parents. Now listen to that statement for a moment, and that is an example of black and white and all or none thinking. Whenever we hear never and ever and always, we usually are in the world of all or none thinking. So if we say, my child will never recapture the education of the year they lost, we're going to feel sad, unhappy, a little depressed. Those are the feelings that come with that thought. But there may be another way to look at it. And so if we can take a look, and again, we can't change, we have to believe whatever change we do in our thinking. So we wouldn't say something like, oh, this is the greatest year my child ever had, because that would not make sense and we wouldn't believe it. But what we could say is, again, water that black and white thinking down a little and say things like, this is a difficult year for my child, and they're going to lose a bit perhaps in their education, but they're young and they're going to have plenty of time to recapture that. And the school districts know what the score is here, and they will make arrangements and make compensations. And in the end, everything will turn out okay. Now, if we believe that, and that's very realistic, and it's not black or white thinking, we begin to feel better. So again, changing our attitude and our perception is one of the key skills to dealing with what's going on with us and our families right now. I'm going to go through some other tools for how to do that, actually. So one thing I work with parents is, and children, is changing their thinking from what is, if, to what is. It's really, I tell them, look, I just want you to change one letter. Instead of what if, change it to what is. And what I mean by that is, when we think about what if, we are actually in the world of catastrophizing. So if we say, what if my child doesn't go back to school this year? Well, what if they fall behind? Well, what if they never catch up? Well, what if as a result they drop out of school? What if they drop out of school and they turn to, not be able to get a job and never be married? And, we go down this road of what we call catastrophizing. And of course, it leads to very significant negative feelings. And so I ask people to say, stop, take a breath, and just say, instead of what if, what is? And what is means we stay in the present, stay in the here and now, because in the present, if we think about what is happening at the moment or today, we can actually have things that we can control. And brings to another tool to teach everyone as a foundation of well-being is being able to control the things we can and let go of the things that we don't have control over. So in stressful situations, you'll find yourself often catastrophizing into the what if cycle, what if downward spiral. And if you take a breath and say, stop, what is, and then ask yourself, what is it in this moment, in this day, that about my situation that I'm in control of? And when in doing that, you begin to feel empowered and begin to have a sense of mastery over your own sort of destiny. So again, not catastrophizing and staying in the present is extremely important. Another area is communication and understanding, as I said, feelings and thoughts, and learning how to validate feelings. Communication, we all talk always about communicating with our partners, communicating with our children. And, I'm going to go through a little bit about what that looks like and what that really means. But the first thing is we need to learn how to validate our children's feelings. And what does that mean? Validate means we listen. I used the term recently, listen so children will talk, and talk so children will listen. They did an interesting study, and they asked teenagers, who would you most like to talk to if you had a problem or a difficulty? And the vast overwhelming majority said, I'd like to talk to my parent or another adult. And then they asked them, question 2, who do you talk to when you have a problem or an issue? And the vast overwhelming majority said, I talk to one of my friends. And the reason for that is they did not feel heard, they felt invalidated. And so what they're really doing is going to someone who has as little knowledge and life experience as they have for advice on how to deal with difficult issues. So how can we change that? And the ways are, like I said, talk so children will listen, and listen so children will talk. And it starts with, as I said, validating feelings, which means when we listen to what our child says, we hear what they feel, and we tell them that we try to understand how they are thinking and that their feeling goes in line with how they're thinking. So for example, if your child says, I'm really sad, angry, my teacher doesn't like me. Our normal parental response would be, we want our child to feel good. So we say, no, that's not true. Your teacher does like you. They talk to me, I know they like you, and you shouldn't feel that way. And what that does to the child is it immediately kind of puts a barrier and says, this person, my parent, does not understand me. So that's what invalidating feelings are. What we need to learn, as I said, is how to validate. And validate means that the person's feelings are right for what they're thinking. Doesn't mean that their situation is correct. So if I was to validate that child in that situation, I would say, I understand why you're sad and angry. If you think Mr. Jones doesn't like you, I would feel that way as well. Now, what they feel at that moment is heard and listened to, and there's a bridge between you and them that you can go to the next step, which is, let's take a look at why you feel that way. Because the goal, of course, would be to understand that better and to change the way they see it if it's not accurate, and then they will feel differently. So validating feelings are important at any age. And I know some of you on the call have very little children. You can actually validate and reflect children's feelings at 2 years old. And keep in mind that children that young are not going to talk to you about how they feel. What you need to do is anticipate and know how they feel, and you need to reflect it to them. So if if my 2-year-old is, and we see it in their behavior generally, and sometimes it's subtle. I mean, when it's obvious, but sometimes it's subtle. And if I see her acting in a certain way, I might say, you look really, that must make you really sad that you can't, play with that doll right now. And she doesn't say, oh, yes, thank you. Thanks for telling me that. You're absolutely right. But there's a certain sense that that she has been heard. So even at a young age, I guess what I'm getting to is you can assume what your child is feeling and reflect it back to them. And they will, in doing so, you're letting them know that you know how they feel. And again, that builds trust in their own sense, trust in you that you understand them, and their willingness to eventually tell you how things are, what they're going through. Some other tools for coping here is, as I said, we have social distance, but it's not social isolation. And we can replace physical contact with meaningful verbal conversation. And people are doing that all over, through Zoom, through phone calls, through writing letters. But we have, many people have learned to express their inner feelings much more clearly and much better than they ever had. Another tool, I think it's very important to honor and acknowledge your own level of concern about what you're going through. There's a lot of people who are arguing with each other about should they go out, should they not, should they go to restaurants, should they not. And I think the key is to make sure that you're not judging other people, that, you can't control what other people do, and we need to allow other people to live their lives the way they want, unless it affects us. And generally, it affects us only when we're in their presence. So, for example, if you demand mask wearing in your house, somebody doesn't want to wear a mask, then probably they shouldn't come to your home. But if they don't want to wear a mask out in the street or wear it out in a supermarket or wherever they go, that's nothing you can do anything about. So it's important not to, people are feeling, a lot of parents are feeling judged by the activities that they're engaged in or that their kids are engaged in. So on one hand, I think it's vital that you don't judge others for their choices. And at the same time, make sure you honor and respect your own feelings, and don't be, especially around the holiday time, a lot of people are trying to sort of pressure their friends and family to do things that they don't want to do. It's okay to have a dinner. We're all okay. We're all healthy, and whatever it may be. I think it's important, whatever your own level of comfort and concern is that you, honor it and go with it. It's really important to find trusted people that you can, trusted people to support you in this time of need. And you don't need a lot, but you need one or two people that you can really open up to, really talk to. Remember that social distancing, as I said, does not mean social isolation. It's also important to understand that the narrative in our head, the stories we tell ourselves about things, is what determines what our mood is going to be. So we have to pay attention to that, as I say, that self-talk, that self-narrative, and make sure we try to make it as realistic and positive as we can. A few more things. Very essential to maintain routines. We've given up a lot of those routines during the summertime, especially I noticed with children in homes where, staying up late at night going on social media and playing video games, and then they'd sleep until 12, 1, 2 in the afternoon, and then just kind of keep rotating that. So having a blueprint, having a course to chart is really important. Your routines don't have to be set in stone, but it's important to maintain a good set of routines during this pandemic, to get up at certain times, to get dressed, to have things that you do as a family, have dinner together at certain days a week, to have make sure you get on a call with aunt, uncle, or grandma, grandpa, whatever, every Tuesday, whatever you pick. Having routines remains essential. It's important to avoid unhealthy habits. A lot of people are using substances to cope. Drinking, alcohol consumption has gone up about 25 to 40%. And that doesn't mean it's necessarily a problem for everyone, because we're home a lot more and having a lot more dinners and so on at home. But it's just important to make sure you're not turning to some substance in order to cope. And if you are, of course, take a look at it and find some way to change that. I work with a lot of families on what I call STEM, S-T-E-M, which is sleep, think, eat, and move. Other important things. Sleep is essential. Sleep hygiene is essential. Normal routines for sleep are essential and will make a huge difference in how we are dealing with this pandemic. Thinking, I've been talking about learning how to have an attitude, a positive attitude towards things. Eating healthy, and movement, which is exercise basically. And exercise doesn't mean going to the gym because we can't these days, but it does mean moving, taking a walk, getting up out of your chair, you know, spending so much time in Zoom meetings, many of us aren't moving for hours at a time. So important to get some movement in your life. And then gratitude. Gratitude has been shown in studies to be completely connected to well-being and happiness. And we have to find ways to just see the good in things that are occurring. And you know, I ask people to have a gratitude list every day. Find 2 or 3 things during the day that were positive for you. And they don't have to be big things, but if we look at things, you know, especially when I see the world and how it's going in our country and how it's going, and having so many people are dealing with illness and with financial loss and with hunger, and you know, begin to be grateful for some of the small things that are in my day-to-day life. But the ability to see gratitude and in your own life is extremely important. So in summary, you know, a couple quick things: embrace the moment, as I said, live in the here and now, control the things you can, and let go of things you have no control over. Lean on past successes and learn how to be resilient, and practice gratitude. You know, I'm the director of the Thel McMillan Recovery Center, and so, you know, we are, a lot of our people use AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and you know, some of the slogans work for us, work for this particular time. And so, one day at a time is a way to cope and a way to deal with things. And this too shall pass. And one day we'll be through this, and it'll be better. You know, I like to end with sort of a parable, one of my favorite parables, and it's for whenever you feel overwhelmed and feel like nothing I do can make a difference, and what I'm dealing with is too big. I remember this story, and it's, you know, once upon a time, so I tell my grandchildren, once upon a time there was an old man who took a walk every day at the beach. And one day after a stormy night, rainy night, he's walking along the beach, and way down at the other end, he sees a little boy who's doing something, he doesn't know what. And as he gets closer, he sees that there's thousands of starfish on the beach, and the little boy is throwing all the starfish in the sand, from the sand, and throwing them into the water. And as he gets closer, the man says, "Son, what are you doing?" And the boy says, "Well, after the storm, all these starfish washed on shore. There's millions of them, and I'm throwing them back in the ocean." And the old man laughed, and he said, "What are you know, you're wasting your time. There's so many. There's 1 million starfish on the beach. You cannot make a difference." And the little boy bends down, he picks up a starfish, and he throws it into the water. He says, "I made a difference to that starfish." And that's the way in which I think when things feel overwhelming, we can, you know, take a different look. So with that, I thank you for your time. And let's see, I don't know how we're going to do questions here. Let me see if there are any. Ms. Cole, have you gotten any, or?
If you want to ask a question, ask away. You could type it in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Thoughts? Go ahead and unmute. There's not a lot of people here. I think we could.
There's not a lot we can do. You know what? I'm going to unmute. I'm going to go into my gallery view here. Hold on. And maybe some of you would like to. If
Any
not, that's
parents?
okay.
Yeah. And Dr. Gelbart covered a
ma'am.
lot of information, so hopefully a lot of it was helpful. Maybe you got all your questions answered, but we're going to be here for a couple minutes. Oh, let me take my video off. Oh. Can you see that question, Dr. Gelbart? Do you need me to read it to you?
I got to put my glasses on. Perfect question. I'm going to read it if you don't mind. What do you do for the kid that doesn't want to talk about what is wrong? Which is many. And if you go, remember what I said, for that child, what you do is you reflectively listen. And what that means is you can talk to them about what you see or how you think they feel, and they don't have to answer or respond at all. So if you say, that must make you really angry, or it must hurt to go through that, or it must be sad not to go to school and see all your friends every day, they will either ignore you or grunt or not say a word. And you know what? That's okay, because they get it. They hear it. And at some point, maybe they will open up and they will talk. But all you need to do is, we call it reflective listening. And that means, and sometimes it's not even listening because they haven't said anything. Sometimes it's just reflecting what you assume they are feeling. And by the way, if you hit the wrong note, they'll tell you that. If you say, "Why, that must make you angry," they say, "No, no, I'm not angry." And that's okay too. So they're hearing you. Thank you for the question, Al. Any others? Okay, well, if not, I will thank you all for taking your time this morning. And, this is a part of a three-time event, and we'll have two more presentations coming up, one in January, one in February, on different topics. So hopefully you'll see you again at that point.
Thank you, everybody. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to me. The video will be posted on our website as soon as we can do that. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gelbart.
All right. Take care. Thanks.